In the precise moment before biological death, almost every recorded spiritual tradition on Earth speaks of the same phenomenon. A tunnel opens. A brilliant light appears. It is described as warm, welcoming, and infinitely loving. Familiar voices call you forward from the other side. Grandparents, spouses, figures of religious comfort, urging you to cross the threshold. For centuries, humanity has been conditioned to view this specific sequence as the ultimate salvation. We are taught that the light is the destination, the final rest after the weary journey of life. But in December of 1945, a discovery in the Egyptian desert shattered this assumption and reintroduced a terrifyingly different narrative to the human record. Two brothers, digging for fertilizer near the cliffs of Nag Hammadi, unearthed a sealed jar containing 13 leather-bound papyrus codices. These texts, buried for nearly 2,000 years, were the lost scriptures of the Gnostics, a group of early mystics who were systematically hunted and silenced by the forming Orthodox Church. What these texts contained was not just an alternative theology, but a warning. They warned that the light seen at death is not heaven. It is a processing station. It is a boundary layer designed by an intelligence that predates humanity, intended to wipe your memory and recycle your soul back into a physical body. This is the theory of the Archontic trap. If this hypothesis is true, then the entire structure of the afterlife as we understand it is a mechanism of containment. But the Gnostics did not just diagnose the prison. They provided a key. Buried within the dense metaphysical treatises of texts like the Pistis Sophia, the Apocryphon of John, and the Gospel of Thomas is a specific frequency sound, a name that acts as a countermeasure. It is a four-letter word that, when understood and projected with intent, was believed to dissolve the illusion of the false light and allow consciousness to bypass the cycle of reincarnation entirely. This video is an extensive investigation into that mechanism. We will analyze the structure of the invisible prison described by the Gnostics, the psychology of the entities known as Archons, and the precise operational function of the word Abba as a tool for spiritual liberation. To understand why a single word could possibly dismantle a cosmic system, we must first define the architecture of the system itself. The Gnostic cosmology is fundamentally different from the Judeo-Christian worldview, despite sharing some terminology. In the Gnostic view, the physical universe was not created by the ultimate source of perfection, known as the monad. The monad is defined as pure, unquantifiable consciousness, existing in a state of perfect stillness beyond time and space. Instead, this physical reality was crafted by a lower, ignorant deity called the Demiurge, often identified in the texts as Yaldabaoth. The descriptions of Yaldabaoth in the hypostasis of the Archons are grotesque and symbolic. He is depicted as a serpent with the head of a lion, blind and insane. This entity is described not as evil in the traditional binary sense, but as fundamentally flawed. He created the material world as a pale, dense imitation of the divine realm, but because he lacks the creative spark of the true source, he cannot generate his own energy. He requires an external supply to sustain his creation. This is the foundational definition of the trap. The system is a closed loop of energy consumption. Below the Demiurge are the Archons. The word Archon comes from the Greek for ruler or authority. These are described as inorganic beings, mental parasites that operate from a dimension just outside our sensory perception. In modern simulation theory terms, we might think of them as the automated administrators or the immune system of the Matrix. They do not possess a creative soul. They are systemic managers. Their function is to maintain the stability of the simulation and, crucially, to harvest the energy required to keep it running. The Gnostics were explicit about what kind of energy feeds this system. It is the emotional resonance of the human soul. Specifically, the lower frequency emissions generated by fear, conflict, addiction, obsession, and despair. This brings us to the mechanism of the trap. If the objective of the Archons is to secure a continuous food source, then the death of the human body presents a crisis. The soul, which contains a spark of the infinite monad, naturally seeks to return to its true home outside the system. To prevent this escape, the Archons designed the reincarnation cycle. This is where the false light comes into play. The Gnostic texts describe a deceptive process that occurs immediately after biological death. The soul, disoriented and stripped of its physical senses, is immediately subjected to a holographic projection. This projection is tailored to the individual's belief system, utilizing the data stored in the soul's memory to create a convincing simulation of paradise. A Christian might see Jesus or angels. An atheist might see a dissolve into biological warmth. A secularist might see their deceased loved ones. The purpose of this display is not comfort. It is consent. The system requires the soul to agree to return. This agreement is often coerced through a process known in modern research as the life review. During this phase, a panoramic replay of the soul's recent life is shown, but it is edited to highlight errors, guilts, and unfinished business. The entities, posing as guides or lords of karma, insist that the soul is not yet ready to graduate. They argue that there are lessons still to be learned, debts to be paid to other souls, and relationships to be healed. This creates a psychological contract. Once the soul accepts the premise that it is imperfect and needs to try again, it is routed back into a new body. Crucially, before re-entry, the memory of the previous existence and the time between lives is wiped. The Gnostics called this the draft of oblivion. In Greek mythology, this correlates with the river Lethe, from which the dead drank to forget their lives. This memory wipe is the linchpin of the prison. Without memory, there is no learning, only repetition. A soul can live 10,000 lives, suffering the same traumas and generating the same emotional energy for the Archons, without ever realizing it is running in a circle. This concept is not unique to Gnosticism. We find striking parallels in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, or Bardo Thodol, which warns the deceased to avoid certain lights and sounds that attract the soul back into the womb. The warning has been consistent across cultures for millennia. Do not be seduced by the first light you see. This cyclical entrapment raises a disturbing question. Is there a way out? If the system is rigged, if the judges are actually the wardens, how does one navigate the moment of death? This is where the Gnostic concept of gnosis moves from abstract theory to practical application. Gnosis is not faith, it is knowledge. It is the direct experiential recognition of one's own nature. The texts categorize humanity into three types based on their level of awareness. The hylics, who are entirely identified with matter and the body. The psychics, who are identified with the mind and emotion. And the pneumatics, or the spirituals. The pneumatics are those who feel an innate, unshakable sense that they do not belong in this world. They are the ones who intuitively sense the artificiality of the social and material structures around them. For the pneumatic soul, the Gnostics provided specific instructions, often encoded in riddles or guarded language to avoid persecution. The most potent of these tools is the vibration of the word Abba. On the surface, Abba is simply the Aramaic word for father. It appears in the New Testament, most notably in the Gospel of Mark, where Jesus uses it in the Garden of Gethsemane. However, the Gnostic interpretation of this word goes far beyond a familial title. It is not a request to a deity, it is a frequency key. To understand the mechanics of Abba, we must look at the science of sound and cymatics. We know that sound shapes matter. Certain frequencies can organize chaotic particles into perfect geometry, while others cause disintegration. In the metaphysical context, the Gnostics viewed the afterlife environment, the astral plane, as a realm highly reactive to thought and sound. The Archons, being inorganic entities of a lower frequency band, construct their illusions using a specific range of energetic density. They can mimic the appearance of angels, but they cannot mimic the frequency of the source. The word Abba is composed of two elemental sounds. Ab, representing the source, the origin, the alpha point, and Ba, representing the soul, the breath, the manifestation. When combined, Abba is a sonic declaration of the reunion between the fragment, the soul, and the whole, the monad. It is a code that asserts identity. The Gnostic argument is that the Demiurge and his Archons have no authority over the monad. They are inferior emanations. Therefore, when a soul identifies itself with the monad using the correct vibrational signature, the archontic authority is nullified. It is similar to a user with administrative privileges entering a command that overrides the local restrictions of a computer program. The historical texts suggest that this word was erased from the mainstream canon because it empowers the individual to bypass the intermediary. The organized church, which established itself as the sole bridge between man and God, had no interest in a teaching that allowed a soul to navigate the afterlife independently. If you can speak a password that dissolves the customs agents of the afterlife, you do not need the church's rites, tithings, or obedience. You become sovereign. This is why the Gnostic texts were burned and their practitioners hunted. They held the exit codes to the matrix. But how is this applied? The texts do not suggest simply shouting a word like a magic spell. The effectiveness of Abba depends entirely on the state of consciousness from which it is projected. It operates on the principle of resonance. If you say the word while terrified, identifying as a victim, or begging for help, the vibration carries the frequency of fear, which feeds the Archons. The instruction is to speak it from a place of sovereign recognition. The process, reconstructed from the fragmentary teachings of the Sethian and Valentinian schools, involves a preparation of the consciousness while still alive. It is a form of rehearsal for the moment of death. The logic is that you cannot expect to wield a weapon in the chaos of battle if you have never held it in peacetime. The practice involves 4 distinct stages: preparation, resonance, projection, and silence. The first stage, preparation, is the withdrawal of attention from the sensory world. This is standard in many meditative traditions, but here the focus is specific. Detaching from the identity of the person, the name, the job, the history, the biological family. These are all constructs of the matrix. The practitioner strips these layers away to access the core observer, the pneumatic spark. This is not about relaxation. It is about disidentification. It is asking the question, who am I if I am not my name, my body, or my history? The second stage is resonance. Before speaking the word, the practitioner must generate the feeling of the true home. This is described as a sense of nostalgia for a place one has never visited in this lifetime. It is the emotional signature of the monada frequency of unconditional peace and vastness that stands in stark contrast to the chaotic, heavy vibration of the earth realm. This feeling acts as the targeting system for the sound. Without the emotion, the word is empty. The third stage is projection. This is the vocalization of Abba. In the ancient practice, it is not spoken quickly. It is intoned. The sound opens the throat and heart, vibrating the chest. The double B stops the flow, creating a moment of pressure, which is then released into the final It is a sonic representation of returning to the origin. The Gnostics believed that this specific sound signature disrupts the holographic projections of the Archons. It acts like a dissonant spike in their smooth simulation. When a soul vibrates Abba with full intent, the false light cannot sustain its cohesion. The image of the grandmother or the angel flickers and dissolves, revealing the inorganic machinery behind it. The fourth stage is silence. After the word is spoken, the practitioner rests in the void that follows. This is the crucial moment of navigation. In the silence, the soul does not look for a light to follow. It looks inward, following the thread of the vibration back to the source. The instruction is to turn away from the external displays, the tunnels, the landscapes, the welcoming committees, and to move towards the center of one's own being, where the connection to the monad is unbreakable. This turning inward is the act of exit. This technique changes the dynamic of death completely. Instead of a passive victim, waiting to be judged or guided, the human soul becomes an active traveler. The life review is refused. The offer of karmic debt is rejected as a fraudulent contract, null and void, because the soul is a sovereign fragment of the monad, not a subject of the Demiurge. The Gnostic Jesus, in the Gospel of Judas and the first Apocalypse of James, essentially trains the disciples in this form of cosmic jurisprudence. He teaches them to say to the entities, "I am from the pre-existent one, and I return to my own place." The word Abba is the energetic encapsulation of this declaration. It is critical to analyze the psychological resistance to this idea. Why is it so difficult for humans to accept that the light might be a trap? The answer lies in the design of the human ego. The ego craves continuity. It craves the familiar. The idea of dissolving into the monad, of leaving behind the drama of human existence, can feel like a form of death to the ego. The Archons exploit this attachment. They offer the soul a chance to fix the past, to save the world, to be with loved ones. These are baits hooking into the ego's attachments. The Gnostic path is arguably the most difficult because it requires the ultimate detachment. It requires the soul to love the truth more than it loves the illusion. Why is this information resurfacing now? We are living in an era of unprecedented information access, where the barriers that kept these texts hidden in desert jars and Vatican vaults have collapsed. The internet has allowed the dissemination of the Nag Hammadi library to millions. This suggests a shift in the collective consciousness. The pneumatic class of humanity is awakening to the nature of the construct, the feeling that many experience, the deep, unexplained exhaustion with the world, the sense of being an observer in a madhouse. The intuitive rejection of authority is, according to this framework, a symptom of the spark attempting to ignite. It is important to approach this material not with fear, but with strategic analysis. Fear is the currency of the Archons. If this information makes you afraid of death, the system has won. The goal of Gnosis is empowerment. Understanding the trap is the prerequisite for dismantling it. The false light relies on deception. It relies on the soul's ignorance of its own power. By knowing the layout of the territory, by understanding the psychology of the wardens, and by possessing the vibrational key, the fear of the unknown is replaced by the confidence of the prepared. The application of this knowledge begins now, not at the moment of death. The Gnostics taught that the kingdom is spread upon the earth, but men do not see it. This implies that the connection to the monad is available in the present moment. Practicing the intonation of Abba in the quiet of the night is a way to tune the instrument of the soul. It creates a groove in the consciousness, a neural and spiritual pathway that becomes easier to traverse with time. When the moment of transition finally comes, the soul will not panic. It will not be dazzled by the pyrotechnics of the false light. It will recognize the situation. It will remember the training. It will speak the word. As we conclude this analysis, consider the implications of the Gnostic worldview. It posits that you are not a body with a soul, but a powerful, immortal spirit trapped in a biological decoding system. It suggests that the feelings of alienation you have felt your entire life are not pathologies to be cured, but signals to be heeded. They are the compass pointing home. The word Abba is the map. The question that remains is personal. Does this resonance feel true to you? When you hear the description of the false light and the memory wipe, does it trigger a deep, intuitive recognition? If so, you may be part of the lineage that wrote these texts. The Gnostics did not seek followers, they sought to awaken equals. The information is now in your hands. The 4 letters have been delivered. The rest of the journey is an internal one. This investigation into the Archontic trap is ongoing. As we uncover more from the ancient scrolls, the picture becomes clearer. If you found this analysis valuable, if it articulated something you have always suspected but could not name, consider engaging with this research further. We are assembling a digital archive of these forbidden mechanisms. Share your insights. Have you experienced the false light in dreams or meditations? Does the word Abba carry a charge for you? The conversation is just beginning, and the more we share, the more the illusion begins to crack. Stay lucid. Remember who you are, and remember the name that opens the door.